Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of 613 Creatives. Today I'm speaking with an Ottawa area filmmaker who has recently moved back home from working in the film industry in Vancouver since 2006. His resume includes working in the special effects department on Supernatural, running a big budget YouTube sketch comedy show, directing an online live action D&D reenactment show, and has a couple of features in the works. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show Nadav Santo. Nadav, how you doing, buddy?
Not too bad yourself.
Not too bad, thanks.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. You had quite the resume. When you introduced yourself, I was like, "Oh my god, this is awesome."
I wanted to impress, and so I, just like, threw everything at the wall to see what would stick.
We certainly did, and I see you've got your demo reel running in the background there. That's a nice touch.
I got a couple things. That's why I wanted to change my background. I was stuck on a Parliament, and I'm like, I've spent all this time. I just filmed pickups for a music video that I'm making, and so my whole area is all shifted around. And I was like, well, I might as well take the opportunity to sort of set up a little stage, and then it took me a minute to switch off that background on Zoom before we started. But here we go. There we go. I got my dog channel going there, and a bunch of other videos that I got going on there. So I'm all set up.
Fantastic. That's awesome. So yeah, I'd like to jump right into it. One of the things that really jumped out at me when you were telling me about all the stuff you've been involved in was this big budget YouTube sketch comedy show that you're talking about. Tell us a bit about that. What's that all about?
It's just something I sort of fell into. I knew some people who came into some money and they wanted to make something, and they decided to YouTube studio, and they would make a bunch of content. And I went along with it, and they had this idea to do this really big budget D&D live reenactment sort of show. And so, they started putting all that together. I was part of that process as well. And we got into production. We shot most of my episode. And started into the next, I think, episode or two when the pandemic hit. Right. And so they had sort of brought in this huge team to do this huge production. And then right when we were sort of getting going, things shut down. And being a YouTube studio, just starting out, going for something that big and bold was awesome. But there wasn't really an audience to sort of justify it. And so when things sort of shut down and they sent everyone home, as they were figuring out what they wanted to, what they're going to do, they just said, "Oh, just start making content." And so I ended up. I mean, that's what I used to do when I was 12. In my parents' house, just like, "Oh, I've got a camera. Let's make some stuff." Nice. And so I just started doing these goofy little sketches. And sort of just put all of my years of filmmaking experience into making a really, overly produced sort of sketch for what it was. And anyways, it seemed to catch on. A lot of other people wanted to start collaborating and doing other sketches as well. And so by the time we actually got back to the office, I had sort of brought together a team of people who were writing and creating sketches, and and then we started producing it on a higher level. Mm-hmm. And what that ended up leading to was getting my own channel through the studio. So then I ended up running this whole department, running the renting room, overseeing production, and tackling most of the post-production on my end as well. I'm just sort of putting all the skills together and sort of coming up with something that, it was a lot of fun. It was ultimately fruitless, but it was a lot of fun to do. And during the pandemic, it sort of kept me employed. So
that sounds like a blast.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah. And, it unfortunately didn't last. But it allowed me to sort of create my own channel and sort of know that I could do that. And it also allowed me to direct the D&D live reenactment, at least a chunk of it. which was one of the few chunks that they released. So it wasn't the full episode that they had intended. It was just a portion of it,
Right.
based on just the sets that we had built at the time. But I mean, that was the biggest production that I had ever filmed on.
Right.
It
That
was like a
sounds
crew
amazing.
of 40, 50 people, filmmakers, having gone, moving into a YouTube studio channel sort of environment and
Yeah.
bringing those skills and that quality of work. And so, I mean, I was a kid in the candy store, just, I don't know, like, oh my God, there was so many things to shoot. I overshot everything because it was just, it was like doing the Hammer Lane live D&D reenactment, was akin to, like taking photos at Lake Louise. I don't know if you've ever been.
I have,
But it's
yes.
just like
Yeah,
this
I know just what you mean.
pristine spot where like you can't really like if you go and just ran and just like quickly snapped a bunch of photos. Like the first time I went, I didn't have a parking pass, so I sort of just snuck in, parked behind a giant RV, ran down. I was like, all right, we got 20 minutes and we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And so we ran down, and I was just like snapping photos, and every single one was just perfect and pristine because of the area and what you were filming.
Oh, yeah.
And so the Hammer Lane set, like it was like I couldn't even, really. It was a dream.
That's
It was huge. Yeah.
That's awesome. Like you're saying, the experience. You said it was fruitless, but I don't. Ultimately, nothing's fruitless because we always learn something from the experience. And I mean, I'm sure that it was something awesomely entertaining during the pandemic. Gave somebody gave people hope.
We had a lot of fun, and it was fun being in a position where I could be in like an overarching producer. And like I've always made stuff, and I've usually always had to make it on my own.
Right.
So I always just sort of figure out a way, and that's sort of how all of that started, anyways. Yeah. So being in a position where I could be an overarching producer, and going from always making stuff myself and having to figure it out, it was fun to sort of open up the doors to let everyone else come in and sort of just support them in their own ways, making sketches, doing whatever, it was an area for anyone who wanted to try to make something, to just come in, try it, mess it up. It's a YouTube channel. There's no real, there's no audience for it yet. We're building it. So let's just figure it out and have fun and learn on the way. And so using sort of all those producer skills and being able to support the whole process was a really good learning. Like it was nice to sort of see all of my skill sets come together and be like, oh, I'm like, I actually really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed sort of supporting other artists and sort of making their projects, and I know that as an artist myself, the thing that I always sort of get annoyed with notes is, well, what I would do is, and it's like, well, what did I make, and how do I make what I made better, versus you saying, well, we used to do something completely different, like what I think you should do. And so I sort of brought that mentality into this idea of like, I don't care what your idea is. Like, it doesn't matter to me, like, what do you want to make? And then like, okay, cool, let's try to make that the best that it can be.
Right.
And learn from that in that process, like I'm very hands-on sort of filmmaker, I have to sort of figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what made that position, made me so effective in that position, is that I've had so many years of editing experience that when I had to produce something, it was like, we need that shot.
Yeah.
Like, oh, no. I'm like, no, we just do me a favor, get that shot.
Yeah.
Because if we need it in post, then we at least have it and don't even worry about, just being able to sort of see it, be like, wait, what is your thought? How is this going to cut together?
Yeah.
Them explaining it and me being able to visually understand, like just having that language and having that rapport and being able to, again, just use those skills to support these younger filmmakers who just wanted a chance to try to make something.
I really appreciate your collaborative, your sense of collaboration. Not a lot of filmmakers. I mean, not every filmmaker has that. They're kind of like, wait, this is the way I want it, and that's it. But yeah, so that sounds amazing. So tell us a little bit more about the meeting with Hammerlane. I watched it and I thought it was hilarious.
So yeah, so the people who were behind it, yeah, it's like in Ant-Man when his friend is sort of always retelling these stories, and they show each
Right.
piece of the story, and
Yeah.
they're saying his words.
Yeah.
And that's like, so it was that idea, and then it was
Okay.
like, okay, well, how does it make sense in this world? And so it must have been something like, well, let's do the gameplay,
Hmm.
and we'll all be the characters, and then we'll take those and we'll just reenact chunks of it.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so it was very like we got to like make fun because I mean, like they're in it, but they're also, just having fun as well. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of play in it
Yeah.
to sort of, yeah, make fun of what we're doing, but also have a lot of fun and use it,
Right.
So yeah, it was an interesting process being part of the team that was sort of tasked to design how it was going to work, like
Hmm.
that was the concept. Now how were we actually going to make it work?
Right.
And so, for me, it was finding, key transition points, like taking what the hour plus gameplay episode, cutting it down to 45 minutes. And then from that being like, okay, well, what are the good story elements that we could sort of, it would be a fun back and forth from the
Hmm.
gameplay to the reenactment,
Hmm.
and sort of play up those things. And so the
Yeah.
Hammer Lane office, I just lucked out. Like that was just ended up being what they gave me, and it
Right.
ended up being first up, and it was just like the most beautiful set.
Yes. It looked
Um,
gorgeous.
I
Right.
just, it was like they kept saying, like, yeah, like Lord of the Rings, not as expensive, but Lord of the Rings, and I was like,
Yeah.
that they delivered. That whole creative team and crew, like they just like the stuff that they could do was absolutely incredible. Like I couldn't thank them enough. I'm running around just giddy. Um, filming everything. And so yeah, so it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of planning, a lot
Hmm.
of figuring stuff out. So it was one of the first times when like I wasn't the main producer,
Right.
like on the thing. So like I actually had to answer to someone and explain certain things. Like it'll work because of this. Like there was this one part where I'm like, yeah, so all the characters walk into the office, and then like I want to do a shot where we track along all six of them, and we can use
Hmm.
pieces of it and show the office and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
one of the producers was like, you know, people don't naturally walk into a room and then line up perfectly in a line.
Yeah.
And I was just like, cinematically, they do. Like I don't know
Yeah.
what else to, like it's this isn't this it's real. This is real life. I
It's
mean, it's real,
Fantasyland you're
right?
playing
Because
in.
it's goblins and stuff.
Yeah.
It's gonna come up on the real here,
Yeah.
but yeah. So like it was sort of yeah, again, sort of pulling all of the cinematic knowledge that I had gained over working in film and studying other directors, and then doing it all, a bunch of it myself, and getting this
Hmm.
opportunity and kind of being like, no, it makes sense because of this, and it'll look great, and like, and
Hmm.
just, yeah, just trying to sort of, yeah, work the process that way. And so I looked at it like working on a TV show, when you're
Right.
a day call director coming in for an episode, and the crew is making the show, and you're sort of just, hopefully getting lucky enough to be able to add a little bit of your own flavor to sort of
Hmm.
what you're making.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's
then, but yeah,
that's
so that was kind of it. Was like, what is the show that you guys are making,
yeah.
and how can I sort of add my little elements of flair and
Yeah. Well,
personality
that's
to what
that's
we're
the
creating.
director's job, right?
Yeah.
But I can tell by watching it, and I highly recommend people check that out. Go on YouTube, search "A Meeting with Hammerlane." You will definitely, especially you D&D fans out there,
Yeah, for sure.
I highly recommend it. It's hilarious and awesome, very entertaining, and you can really tell that the people that were working on it were having fun, genuinely having fun doing this shoot. It sounds
Yeah,
like
no,
it
it was
was
great.
a riot to shoot. I did happen to find your IMDb and noticed that you had worked on Supernatural.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. That sounds pretty cool.
So technically, it was visual effects. My editing experience is what got me into that, and
Okay.
I mean, I'll tell a story because there's probably a lesson in it. the reason why I got that job was I started as a PA on Supernatural. And like,
Okay.
if anyone's like, especially, 15 years ago, if anyone's worked on a set as a PA on a CW show, it's like, if it's less than 15 hours, like, it's like, oh my God, it's typically like 16, 17 hours before you're
Yeah.
home. And so it's a grueling thing. And at one point, I must have had a conversation with the visual effects supervisor at the time,
Mhm.
a good friend of mine, Ivan Hayden. And I must have mentioned that I edited, right? Like it's all about
Okay.
who you just always be open, always talk to people,
Yeah.
always just like, oh, what are you into? What do you do? Like, oh, I'm an editor. I was interested in how the visual effects side works in with post and all that kind of stuff. That must have been something about it, right?
Right.
And because 2 years later, I get called to do a day call on Supernatural, and he's like, "Oh, we need someone who can edit." And I was like, "Oh," and so my day call, as a PA on Supernatural ended up getting me pulled into the post production side of things, where I was for years later, and so that sort of ended up being what I was doing since, and
Wow.
so yeah, so always be chatting people up and then trying to make connections and conversations, because you literally have no idea what openings might, but always just be open and willing to have those connections and communications, because you never know how it'll pay off. So that one
Absolutely.
paid off huge.
Hmm.
And yeah, and so what I was doing was I was editing in the visual effects shots into the episodes.
Okay.
So in LA, they would edit. So they'd shoot up in Vancouver. They'd
Hmm.
send all the footage to LA. LA would cut it together. They'd send me the episode that they were working on
Hmm.
with the visual effects sort of elements in
Right.
place and how they wanted it to look.
Right.
And then I would sort of uh, pull all of those plates, um, organize them for the artist, put them in full, like just organize them for the artist. They would work on the shots, and once the shots were done, I'd edit them into the episode, QC it. Um, if I thought it was good, I would bring in the boss. He'd check it out, give notes. If he thought it was good, I'd package it up at the end of the day and send all the shots to LA. And then they would lay it out over their episodes, watch it, give notes, back and forth until the episodes aired. And so I did it for seasons, and it was
Hmm.
probably one of like it's up there. It's like one of my two favorite jobs I've ever had.
I can imagine.
In that it was such a unique experience, in that we were a small little team working exclusively for Supernatural. Like it
Okay.
wasn't like I was in a huge post house and we did a bunch of shows.
Oh,
It
okay.
was like so like I had the producers of Supernatural come and sit down in my office to watch shots, and
Right.
I could ask them questions and have conversations and build relationships and rapport and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, and so it was just like, like I worked in a big production, in a big post production house before, and you don't really get that sort of intimate one on one time,
Right.
and so yeah, it was just a really special experience.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
It sounds like
and then
it for
like
sure.
learning visual effects was also a big uh, plus for filmmaking. Like part of why I why I went out to Vancouver in the first place was to go to the Vancouver Film School, and that's because I had done a music video on a bigger level, um, and I had like a DP who was asking me questions, and I had no idea what he was talking about, and
Okay.
I was like, I need to learn the lingo. And so that was me going to Vancouver Film School to sort of just learn the lingo so that I could have conversations with people about what it is that I wanted as a director.
Right.
And then working in the visual effects department allowed me to learn how visual effects works and how to use them effectively and what are the best ways. And when you have, day call directors coming in who don't understand visual effects and don't take the time to understand it, and it's like just fix it in post, right? There's a
Right.
famous, image of like fix this in post, you know. I don't know if you can use that. I apologize.
No,
Uh,
that's all right.
but
Probably blurred
but
it.
it's because like it's the best visual effects shots that come out are the ones that are done properly
Yeah.
on the day, and not like, well, we'll fix it later on. Like those
Yeah.
happen where you just
Absolutely.
like, yeah, we ran out of time, we ran out of money, like it just is what it is. and those are fine. Like that happens. But like when you as a filmmaker don't understand something and don't want to understand it,
Hmm.
you're impeding yourself in understanding how to use the tool effectively and properly, and yeah, just effectively and properly.
Yeah.
Um, so
That's
yeah, so that
an,
was another side to the visual effects, was
yeah.
sort of adding that to the repertoire of filmmaking and being like, okay, well, I'm not afraid of it anymore. Like if someone explained to me how it works, it like I will understand,
Yeah.
based on my experience. So
Yeah. Well, that sounds like it was an absolutely amazing learning experience all around.
mhm.
Just out of
Yeah,
curiosity, what were you using to edit on the show?
I started off with Avid,
Okay.
um, but most of the artists started using Adobe products,
Okay. So
and stuff
Premiere,
that just
After
worked
Effects.
better with After Effects with
Yeah.
Adobe.
Right.
And I've been using Adobe since almost day one. That
Yeah.
was like
Same
the
here.
first program I used. I had a friend who set up my first editing computer, and he's very much ooh, the new thing, and then he would like editing suite down for 2 days while I rebuild it into an even better. It's like one of those processes of like, okay.
Right.
So like I ended up going on to Final Cut for a
Okay.
bit, but then they changed it to like the iMovie like Final X or whatever it
Oh yeah.
was, and so I went back to Adobe. But yeah, I started even dabbled a little bit in DaVinci Resolve.
Yeah.
I'll say that like I still have issues finding work that in post production as an editor that doesn't like the requirement is as Avid. It's still like that's the industry standard.
Right.
Um, and I've rebelled against that since like my teens, and maybe I should
Yeah.
stop. Uh, but so a lot of people like so a lot of my friends they don't use Avid and they're editors and they're like, I
All
don't have any
right.
problems. But I've always run up against that, so I would say try to just get familiar with like all the different
Of
kinds of
course.
programs. Like there's
Yeah.
DaVinci Resolve that which is really great and became a much more of an editing. Like, it's not like just color
Hmm.
anymore, so it's a much more of an editing program, a full suite. And but yeah, I just like my heart is with Adobe.
Yeah.
Like
Same here.
you
Yeah.
know, you, it was
This will be
so
cut in
user
Adobe.
friendly. I mean, the first time I edited, my buddy showed me like, okay, this is how you use the program, this basic little things, and then
Right.
he sort of left me to my own devices. And so it was like 6 p.m. He went out to go for drinks. This was back in university. So he goes out at 6 p.m., comes back at 3 a.m., has to get up at 9 for a class, and got home at 3. I was still editing. Woke up at like 7:30. I was still editing and left the class, and I was still editing like
Life
over
of an
12
editor.
hours. Just
Yeah.
you know,
Life of an
caffeinated
editor.
peppermints, just little mints. And just like I was like, it was such a fun experience, and I just like I could like I loved
Yeah.
seeing it all just sort of come together.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
say to
those,
people that, oh, I find, what do they'll ask me, like, what's the most fun thing of, of filmmaking? And it was, of course, directing. But I love editing. And then they just look at me weird, like, really? That you find that fun? Isn't it grueling? I'm like, well, yeah, but I guess you get it. You got to be there to
yeah,
know, right?
it is grueling. It's
Yeah.
interesting. I don't know what your process is. But
Well,
for
everyone's is
me,
unique.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
exactly, right. And so like for me, I know that my hiccup is that I won't finish the whole thing and I'll get caught in that like watching the same
Hmm.
30, 35, 45 seconds a minute, like just piece by piece and get stuck in that loop. So I
Yeah.
know that like I always try to fight that.
Yeah.
But for me, like once I got it sort of put together, like I have to watch it so many times that I sort of stop watching it, and then all of a sudden these mistakes start popping up, like things that I'm like I'm not barely paying attention, like I'm zoned out, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that looked weird. What was that?
Right.
Or like or I see it so much that all of a sudden I see it in a new way,
Yeah.
and I start going like, oh, that's why it's not working because of this and this and this and this and that needs to. And it's just like I'm doing a music video, as I said, and like I've got like a rough cut, and I was just like I watched it like 50 times
Yep.
in a row, just on a loop. And at one point I went, oh, and it was like three things. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I was finally much happier. Just three things.
Right.
I was not happy with the video.
Yeah.
And then I finally saw what it was, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what's bothering me. I
Yeah.
fixed those things, and now I'm like, oh,
An
all
epiphany.
right, cool, we're getting there.
So that's probably a good lesson for those out there interested in editing. If you don't like repetition, it's probably not for you. I do want to touch on and give you as much time as I can here. We got about 10 minutes left, but I'd like to talk about the two feature films that you got in development. That
Yeah.
sounds like incredible. Like tell us a bit about these.
Yeah. Well, I'm just in development, so the scripts are written, and they're not perfect yet, but I think they're close enough that the general idea is there. So with the two features, it's basically started where I just wanted to sort of get better at writing. Like I had already always fancied myself as a writer, and I always wrote, but I never really buckled down and like let me get really really good at it. So
Right.
after I left YouTube Studio, uh, I took like the rest of the year off to focus on writing some scripts, and so I wrote four. I wrote two and I rewrote two. The first one was utter garbage. The two rewrites got them closer to what I wanted it to be, but they still weren't really there, and they're also really expensive. And the ultimate goal was to write something that I might be able to produce myself. So I ended up writing this fourth one, and it ended up being like really good and really like got a really great reaction from people.
Mhm.
And so I was like, this is the one I'm going to make. And so it's sort of just been a process of putting it together. And while that's been, I put together a short and sent it off to some festivals, and that's going to continue going. And yeah, and right now I've got a business plan for both of them, and that I'm wrapping up, and sort of just looking for initial funding to get the ball rolling.
Fantastic.
Figuring out the producing side of it, where you sort of figure out how to shuffle the money around in terms of
Yeah.
like, well, the initial investment for the tax
The
credits,
business
for
side's
the this, for the
never
that.
never as fun as the
Like
creative side.
yeah, it's like building a house of cards and then gluing it right at the end when everyone says yes, and it's
Yeah.
just like hoping it doesn't fall apart at any point. So that's the process. That's where I'm at right now. Is sort of just trying to get a feature film made that I can put my
Awesome.
name on, and yeah, and just that's sort of the process. And so
That's fantastic. I'd love to work with you sometime. I've been
absolutely,
in I've worked in filmmaking in some form or another for 30 years. Back when I was in film school, it was everything was done on flatbeds on with actual celluloid, and I had to evolve to the digital world. But yeah, I've filled just about every crew position you can think of.
yeah,
And yeah, that's my filmmaking is my passion as well. So yeah, we should definitely stay in touch and maybe collaborate on something.
yeah, for sure. We'll do this again for sure.
Really quickly, what sort of advice would you give to somebody who wants to do what you do?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like I'm a slow learner. It takes me forever to learn stuff.
Same here.
And so fight, I fight it a lot. And that's the one thing I would advise is I got to one point where I thought if I can't tell something simple really well and effectively,
Mhm.
I won't be able to break all of the rules and tell something more complex any better, Like I focus so much on telling these crazy stories, and it was always so expensive, and I would never be able to make them. And eventually, I got to a point where like, let me just try to make something simple, really, really, really well, and get really good at that. Because if
Yeah,
I do that really well, then someone will be like, oh, I'll give you some money to do something a little bit bigger. And
mhm,
then if you do that really well, and then you just build the ability to just tell a good story.
mhm.
And
That's key.
effectively break rules, like not
Mhm.
just break rules because the rules don't apply to you, but
Yeah,
use the rules, establish the rules of your world, and then break the rules to
yeah,
a more dramatic effect,
yeah. Once you
or a
know
more
them,
emotional effect.
yeah,
So
that's the
that's what
craft.
I would say. Yeah, is focus on something simple and focus on telling it really, really well.
Well, it sounds like you and I have a similar process. I haven't evolved to the feature stage yet, but I've got quite a
That's
few shorts under my belt, and that was a similar. I had a similar sort of mindset, like do something simple, something that's achievable, realistic, and keep doing that and get really good at it and build on that. So that's awesome advice. So if somebody, I highly recommend everybody out there check out Nadav's stuff. I've seen examples of his work, and he's got some amazing looking, gritty looking, and fun works under his belt. Highly recommend you check out his stuff. And Nadav, how would somebody get a hold of you if they wanted to collaborate?
To get a hold of me, I've got my YouTube channel. I'm on Facebook, and I'm going to get more into Instagram as well. I believe my Instagram is Nadav Santo, Nadav5 Santo.
Yeah.
Facebook, Nadav Santo. And leave me a message on my YouTube channel, N_DAD. Or just, come chat with my dog.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Nadav. This was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story. This was amazing, very inspiring. Everyone who's listening out there, please give us some feedback on the kinds of things that you'd like to hear on our show. Please share this with anyone and everyone that you know in Eastern Ontario that's interested in filmmaking. I want to thank my audience for all your support thus far. It's been fantastic. Keep on listening. And please, having said that, check out some of our other episodes as well. So once again, Nadav, thanks very much for being with us and telling your story. This was a lot of fun. This was great. Thanks again.
Thank you very much for having me, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thanks, Nadav. And thanks for listening, everybody. And we'll see you next time.